So, Stephanie, I've noticed that when people say, "Hi, how are you?" that we rarely answer honestly. So I want to reinvent the question. And I like to ask my friends, like, what's cracking your heart open right now? What's lighting you on fire?
I mean, I get up in the morning to listen to this incredible connection and wisdom and insight and experience when I interview all the women for She Can, but also now some of the men, where I really see that this connection and community and collaboration is setting them on fire. And that's when I feel we are onto something. And that's why I get up in the morning. And the feedback from our girls and women and boys and men that listen to these role models leading by example and what it does for them and how it changes their life. And that's what sets me on fire. And I love when people know that by giving 30 minutes of their time, they can have a transformational impact on other people.
Yes, and add to cart. Yes. So thrilled to have you in the hot seat for very specific reasons. Not only do, you and I share a soul connection because we met on the soul level, we met in circles. We didn't meet out
That's
in
it.
the world of
Small
masks and
talk.
agenda and work and family. And you and I only have a soul connection.
We do, and She Can was born as part of circling. I mean, I started interviewing some friends during the pandemic, and I joined your circles, and I really figured out what this She Can is and what it's going to be, sitting in circle and listening to all the incredible women in the circles. And then I thought, actually,
Wow.
I've been sitting in circles for decades, right? I've been sitting in circles with my grandmothers who were role models and had to flee from different European countries to Germany and set up new lives. And I've been circling with the women and the girls that I was supporting in Ethiopia through my programs for 20 years. And actually, it was always in a circle. I mean, it was literally in a circle. We sat in Ethiopia for 20 years, helping struggling girls and women with different services, whether that was schooling or scholarships or microfinance. But when they struggled, we brought in someone who was slightly further along the curve, who could come and tell her how she went through the challenges. That was always in a circle. And that's when I understood the power of role modeling and storytelling. And every circle of yours, exactly, every story of women in the circle, that was a lifeline during the pandemic, because we were, while we had a beautiful home. I mean, A, we had a home. B, I have a family. I had my three amazing children at home. I had my husband working from home for the first time in forever. So it was sort of an idyllic and beautiful thing to happen to us. But at the same time, I was homeschooling, I was working, I was trying to make my charity survive. Fundraising had ground to a halt, and I started telling the stories of our women and girls in Ethiopia to keep on fundraising. And then I, in the circles with you, I like, various epiphanies or constant mic drop moments. I thought, actually, this is what it is. I have been sitting in circles for my whole life, and actually I never realized, or I never saw it this way. And I saw and experiencing the circles with you and having a prompt and circling around certain things. And I thought, I have been doing that in Ethiopia for 20 years. And actually, I have started interviewing my friends because my daughter didn't know what I did or what any of my friends did. And then it sort of became full circle. I understood the transformational potential that every woman's story holds, and how that can be so transformational and powerful for another girl, another woman, and indeed boys and men, because we now have 500 women, over 500 women, leading by example, leading with their stories on WeCan, and have 3 million listeners in the past 12 months without spending any marketing dollars. This is organic growth of people just coming across it and getting the guidance, the inspiration, the motivation, the energy, whatever it is that they're looking for. They will find it in those conversations. And 50% of our listeners are men. At the beginning, I thought, what are they doing here, and why are they listening to our conversations? And then I thought, and then through the feedback of men that engaged, we destroyed the rule book, right? There is no rule book, and men are looking for guidance just as much as girls and women do. And I went into it thinking, girls' confidence goes down by, 20% in teenage years. Their stress levels go up by 250%. Their anxiety goes up by 88%. I mean, the data is somewhat, difficult to wrap our head around. But, and I thought I'm doing it for the girls and the women to find the guidance. But really, I now realize it's for everybody. And so, yeah, I'm just very grateful to you and Emily and Tracy for being on this podcast. Every week I love getting the new episode and finding and listening to more incredible women sharing their stories, and have understood in your circles this transformational power and potential that each story holds, and how powerful and impactful it is when we share it. And I guess that's really what WeCan is about.
It is. Oh my gosh. You just said so many things I want to reflect on. But I'm going to start at the end when you're talking about that 50% of your listeners are men. And I have come to learn that this is part of the sacred balance that we as women have to become aware of allowing to happen, because many of us women, because it's happened on my podcast too, is we're the ones who think, because we're women doing podcasts, that it's only for women. And actually, not every man has that understanding. So men are listening and we're like surprised. But why are we surprised? I listen to male podcasts. I listen to male content. I never think a man's podcast is just for men. But it's usually women that ask me, oh, is your podcast, it's just for women, right? And I'm like, no, I just happen to be a woman. And yes, I talk to a lot of women, but men are listening too. So I think we have to undo our judgment on ourselves that what we're doing is only for women, that it's really women. We're half the population, we're half the market, it's consumerism. Like, why are we limiting ourselves in that we're only for women when you have the evidence now, which is so exciting, that 50% of your listeners are men? And that's the balance that I do believe that men are craving the same thing we're craving. They're craving connection. They're craving love. They're craving information
Community.
about what you have to teach, what you have to share. Men are craving that too from all different types of women. And that's what I love about your platform, is that you are covering all of it. You are interviewing women from all over the world, across all different careers and all different offerings. So that's incredible. How exciting that you and I are sharing this like ripple effect information, discovering that when we share our stories, that's the medicine. That's what we all
Yeah.
need. We need to keep sharing the real deal in a real way,
Yeah.
which I love how you offer your content and your interviews to all of us, is because you offer us real women, real stories. And I also love that you said you've been circling all this time. We have been circling all this time. We just didn't call it that. And now it's making this like really like modern day comeback where we're saying like, yes, let's sit in intentional circles with groups of women. Let's source the wisdom. You and I have sat in many circles together. Let's source the wisdom that comes through the entire circle, not just you, not just me, but the entire circle. And that's what I always joke that's, reason number 847 that why I love circles is that it's not just about one person teaching, it's about receiving the collective information amongst that particular group of
Yeah.
women.
Yes, and I think that, when I ran these programs in Ethiopia, we would put money into one girl or one woman, but this money was always having the ripple effect of 5 more people at least. So if we put $50 into a woman for a microfinance endeavor that she was embarking on, that would benefit 5 more people. And the same thing is in your circles, and the same thing is with these interviews, because I think that it's mothers and daughters and friends and sisters telling their friends and sisters and brothers and fathers and God knows what, because otherwise I have no idea how we got to 3 million listeners in the past 12 months without actually spending any marketing dollars, and in times where really most of our content, or content that is in any way, shape or form to do with diversity, equity or inclusion, gets buried by the algorithms on YouTube,
Wow.
on Google. So
Wait,
really
say
the
that again.
algorithm.
Wait, say that again. Say that again. I think I
So
heard you, but I need to hear that
so
again.
so sadly, in the since the autumn, the technologies that our conversations sit on, so YouTube, podcasts, Apple, Google, they bury we get buried, our content gets buried in the algorithm, because we talk about women's stories, we talk about diversity, equity and inclusion, and not always at the same time. But this content is content that the world does not want to see anymore. Or there are certain people in the world who have a lot of power, who don't want to see this content anymore. And so they bury you in their algorithms.
Got
So
it.
actually, our content goes out to a lot less people than is possible. And I see the difference, because when I wasn't at all intentional at the beginning of WeCan, some of those conversations where I wasn't as good in interviewing as I am now, the conversations weren't as interesting, I wasn't techie savvy yet, so I didn't really know how to put them through TubeBuddy and upload them on YouTube in a
Yeah.
way where it makes sense. And so they some of them got more listeners than some of the conversations do now, where we have thrown a little bit more weight behind it, and really it should distribute out into the world much easier and much more. And so I think that has supercharged our missions. I think it has supercharged your mission, Dre. If I look, we've done circles, but now you're doing this podcast with Emily and Tracy, which is amazing. We all feel, and we literally feel it in our bones, that what we do is so much more important than ever before, because we have to be radical about what we believe in these days. We have to be radically sitting in circles. We have to be radical and intentional about championing each other. We have to champion other girls and women. We have to fill the gaps and build the bridges. We have to come together as girls, women, boys and men, because it's important. We have to bring about change. We have to be part of the narrative, and we decided to be part of the solution, right? So every one of us who does something to build those bridges and to fill those gaps is doing something for humanity to bring us forward, and also to hold against the extreme right that is very powerful all around the world right now, not just in America, who are creating a reality that you and I don't want to be a part of. And we have children, so we are fighting for a future for our children where we have enough role models leading by example, showing how things can be done and how people get to where they are today, overcoming challenges, overcoming this feeling of isolation and these narratives that we get fed, that we're so divided. We're not so divided. We have so much more in common than we think. And so, you know, not letting people buy that and holding against this, I think is so important. And then I also, and that's, I've been talking to Emily about this in our conversation for She Can, it is paying rent. We have this incredible fortune to be on this planet Earth at this time. We are paying rent. Each one of us has to figure something out where we give back for the higher good. And what is the easiest way of doing that? Well, telling your story, right? Being intentionally with someone, telling your story, because you will definitely influence one other person, most probably hundreds or thousands of tens of thousands of other people. Now that's really simple and really powerful.
It is. It's a radical concept that I love that you support, I support, we believe, and we practice. And that is, you do matter. Your voice matters. Anything that you do with integrity, aligned with your values, matters. And the narrative that is sold to us is that it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Is that you're alone, you're separate, give up, be afraid, be very afraid.
Be
It's very
confused.
dark. Yeah, be confused.
Very confused.
Yeah, let's throw a lot of distracting, very scary ideas at you to keep you silent. And I'm talking in general, but that's what it feels like. And a lot of people are taking the bait and they're staying afraid. And then a lot of people like you or I are going, don't be afraid. Lean in, keep going. I love this sentiment, like paying your rent to be here on planet Earth. Like, what are you contributing?
Yeah.
And also lean into creating community circles, whatever you want to call them, because there are so many of us out there looking for the same thing.
Yeah.
And that's what we experience in circles. We experience our commonality and our connection rather than isolation and staying alone with our thoughts. And that's the wildfire. That's where everything catches on fire in a good way, which is you speak your truth, it ignites me, and then I'm inspired to speak my truth.
Yeah.
And that's the ripple effect.
Exactly. And I think it's literally for our health and well-being, our physical and emotional and mental well-being, because when we sit in these circles or we build this connection or this community, it regulates our nervous system. It puts the world the right way up, and it gives us this hope and this inspiration that we need to continue on our path and to resonate with people, and sometimes to agree to disagree, but in ways where we're not othering or canceling, but just sometimes, I completely feel like what you say, and sometimes I think, no, actually, I don't think I resonate, but I still am listening and I'm hearing and I'm believing. I believe you. I listen to you, I hear you, I see you, and I don't have to agree on everything you say.
Right.
Also, that I think is an important role modeling going forward, because it's so divisive that we think we always have to agree on everything. No, we don't. We have to agree maybe on slightly more than 50%. And if that is the case, we're good. Then we're rolling. And so in order for us to find all the ways to overcome the challenges that we face as a society in the world now, this is exactly what I believe we need. We need the role models who show that we don't have to agree on everything. And if I think back, I have interviewed over 500 women, and there was only one woman out of 500 women that I really couldn't get a connection to. So, more than 500 women, I felt every single time there is so much more that unites us than divides us. There was only one woman who I couldn't resonate with at all. And I think she reacted to me, actually, and therefore, there just wasn't a connection. But yeah,
Well, it's interesting. It's interesting you say that, because I feel like I can connect with anybody. And then a wise woman once said, just because you can connect with everybody doesn't mean you have to. And I was like, oh, right. So you could still do an interview and not have some, I mean, 1 out of 500, those are pretty high numbers of connection for you. That's incredible.
And I feel that story by story and piece by piece, we are reshaping this future together, and not through division, but through this inclusion and this shared understanding. This shared understanding is what we need to look for. And
Yes.
the world also depends on the stories that we choose to hear and that we choose to tell, right? And the rest is noise. And it's showing this to people, in to girls and women definitely, but to people in general. You don't have to listen to all the noise. You are the captain of your boat, and you decide what stories you get to tell and what stories you want to hear.
I sat in a circle last night, and beautiful full moon circle. It's a full moon right now as we're recording. And somebody shared something, and I experienced discomfort, what they were sharing about. And I just observed it, and I was like, oh yeah, what's coming up for me? Oh, I know what's coming up for me, right? I wonder if that's why. No, I don't wonder. Hold on. Let me rephrase that. I have learned to sit with my discomfort, and I can still listen to somebody share. It's a practice. That's part of the practice of circling. I don't have to change the person's mind. I'm listening with the intention to seek to understand, rather than change their mind, let's say.
Yeah.
But that's a practice, to sit with my discomfort. And it's just dawning on me as you're talking about, we don't have to agree on everything. Have we become, in many parts of our society, I'm not making a blanket statement, I'm just saying, like, in general, is because we're not used to sitting with our own discomfort. That's why we get so, I don't want to talk to this person, they're different than me. We don't believe the same thing. It's not because what they're saying is so terrible. It's that I'm not used to sitting with my own discomfort, so I want to run away from the argument. Now, of course, there are people that are saying outrageously harmful, hateful things that do threaten my life.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about that level of discomfort. I'm just talking about having a political difference with your family member at the dinner table, and we're not used to holding space for differences because we're not used to, or we're losing our ability to navigate our own discomfort.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. I think that's definitely true, and I think the more we can show and show people that that is possible, and that we don't have to agree on everything. We don't even have to agree on most things. if we agree on the principles, by and large, or I sometimes think really 50%, if it's more than 50%, we're on the same side. That's not a lot. We have so much more that we share than we don't share as humans, because our stories are so personal, but we all know they're so universal. And I interview woman after woman, and there are so many themes that come up that are
Yes.
the same themes,
Yes.
and I feel it all the time, and people who listen also feel it. And women who've been summoning other women, they know that. Anyone who is a journalist, and you had a couple of those women on your podcast, Brooke Baldwin, she's interviewed an enormous amount of women, then wrote a book about it. And there is so much that we share as women, but as
What do you think
humans.
what are like the top themes that you hear women sharing about, or like the most valuable themes right now for women? Or for
I mean,
anybody, but because you interview women, that's why the question is, what are the themes that come through the modern women that you interview today? Like what is the
yeah.
driving,
So
essence of those interviews?
So after 550 women, we decided we are also going to interview men, the ones who fill the gaps with us. So the men who really either build fully inclusive companies or help our inclusive efforts. And so that's something new, which I'm excited about. But in terms of the themes that I see, I think that there are many themes that we are very aware of because it's just conditioning. We had thousands of years of living in a patriarchal society. And because we sort of tore up the rule book, we are still entrenched in certain realities. One of them is women do not champion other women to this day. And we see this with our girls in schools, and we see that with women in business, and we see that in all the spaces that we inhabit. I think another notion is that women still to this day do not feel safe in this world. And there is numerous stories of women telling their stories of what happened to them because they aren't safe in this world. I think another theme is that we do not invest in women, right? Because often we don't even believe them, or we don't value their insights. So I think one of the main reasons why I keep on pushing and want to get to 10,000 women, which is a tall order, is that we need more women's insights at decision-making tables around the world, in all the different spaces we inhabit, right? All the spaces where we are, and we are 50% of the world population. We need to, men and women, make these spaces safer and more prosperous for girls and women, because when she can, we can, and it will make the world a better place. I think, the easiest way of helping girls and women is to champion them, to invest in them, and to buy from them. That these are very easy ways that don't cost anyone anything. I think this is definitely a theme. Every female founder knows that if we women would stick together and have each other's back and would champion each other, their businesses would explode. Just because it's a numbers game. We are a lot of girls and women in the world. If we overcame only this one thing of really championing each other, I think it would make a huge difference, not only economically, but societally. And I think we would then also show men how this is done. Instead, we still play to the old playbook where we don't do that. And therefore, we create this division again and again. So I think it's a very personal thing that we all need to change that within ourselves, but we also have to role model that to everybody else. And so I feel every conversation we have, we're chipping away at this playbook that is sort of the old playbook that we don't want to be a part of anymore. I think another theme is women's health. We have a lot of gaps to fill in women's health. There is a lot of stories of women entrepreneurs changing that, investors changing that, a lot of women's stories within the sort of women's health field that have been struggling, have been gaslit and had real difficulty getting to a diagnosis. I think that there is many allies, many more allies than we think there are. So that's really a positive thing. I have so much feedback on so many women's stories, and there is a lot of allies. We have to look for them. You know, who are the people that really support you on your journey? That's often men and women in the spaces that you inhabit. And also, I think that success has absolutely nothing to do with age. You know, we interview girls, we interview women in midlife, we interview older women. It doesn't matter. Success has nothing to do with age. And there's definitely no time limit on anything. I think the largest amount of women I have is in their 50s and, you know, being really successful now in their 50s, or starting companies where they're so successful in their 50s with the view to making this difference for the next 20 or 30 years, right? We don't seem to think anymore that we retire in the mid 60s. That is not a thing. You know, I'm 53. I'm so excited. I'm going to dedicate my next 20 or 30 or however many years I have left to this project. And I'm so excited by that. And I feel that's something else we women don't tell other women. There's a whole part of your life where your children are basically grown up. You basically have an empty nest and you have so much to give.
Yeah.
Life is not over. Life's just starting again.
Yeah, and we're coming into a deeper understanding of our power. I'm 55 and I've never felt better, more excited for the now and for what I'm doing and to keep doing it. All those themes resonated. All of those themes are so important that we talk about and continue to talk about. And I'm going to add to those themes the internalized patriarchy that we're still recovering from and needing to undo amongst women, that we're not even aware up until now. We are becoming more aware.
Yeah. Up until now, I love that. Yeah.
Up until now, that we have internalized patriarchy. I think it's why male leaders keep getting elected by women too, because deep down they go, he knows a little bit better than I do.
Definitely.
That the trust, because we haven't seen the evidence yet, but you're building the evidence by sharing all these stories. We haven't seen enough evidence yet to get into our subconscious, to get into our bones, to get into our DNA, that, oh yes, I trust other women. I trust other women.
Yeah, it's about
so
trust.
I may intellectually believe that, oh, she should lead. She's a great leader. On paper, she has all the stats. But what I've experienced is that women still don't trust other women because it's been ingrained in us not to trust one another. And we're undoing a lot of historical evidence of why we should not trust each other. But that's what the remedy is, what you're doing, what I'm doing, sitting in circles where, look, you and I fell in love in a circle. We've never met in person, but I trust you with my heart and soul, because we've learned that in circles it feels amazing to love and trust other women. That's our nature. That's our essence, but we have to be reminded, and we have to, in a way, remember, reprogram, or recall, or relearn. And for some women, I'll take out the word re. They have to learn, they have to experience it, because up until now, they had no idea that it was possible.
Yeah, it doesn't feel instinctive anymore. And in the circles, it definitely becomes instinctive. right? It doesn't feel as if you have to try even, because you feel that there are women who are holding you. And the beautiful thing is about your, the sort of quote unquote rules that you spell out at
Guidelines.
the
We call them
beginning.
guidelines. Guidelines.
Guidelines,
Stephanie,
guidelines,
guidelines. We don't need any more rules.
guidelines. Tears are welcome.
Yeah.
All the guidelines that we share at the beginning that sort of put a context around this container where you feel safe and you feel heard and you feel seen and you feel held, because there were many moments that we feel very emotional about sharing things that we didn't even know we ever wanted to share, and it just comes up and you share it and you're being held. And I think this is a feeling that not very many women or girls experience in their life, and therefore it isn't instinctive.
When you were talking earlier, I had this image. You said something about how young girls and teenagers are feeling, and I just had this vision of the structures that are still in place for young girls that are growing up. And I thought that it's the structures have to change too. So the way we teach young girls, or the way systems are organized through school, through sports, through competition, that it's the opposite of what a circle is about, which is inclusion, which is the whole, which is coming together to source the greater good. So I wonder if our systems have to upgrade and change too, because those are the ones that are also keeping them in a competitive or separate, or it causes them distress. I mean, it's also culture and marketing and advertising, but it's also the systems that we funnel them through that don't really support what you and I are talking about.
Definitely. I mean, I think if you look at the data, there is 241% increase in stress levels of girls between 13 and 18, an 88% increase in feeling anxious. There's a 20% confidence and drop. And I think all of these gaps, and 91% of girls say that all of those things would be a lot better if they had a mentor. Now, there's the reality where many girls in the world don't even have a mentor. They don't have a role model. So WeCan is there for those girls, but it's also there for these girls that have maybe a couple of role models or mentors, but actually, they might want to do something else with their life, and they need to look up, okay, I want to do psychology. Let me look on WeCan and who are the psychologists and what is their story and what does their journey look like, and finding inspiration on do you go to uni and study psychology, or what are the different ways of becoming a psychologist. So it's all of those things that one can use WeCan for as a research tool, and especially to close that confidence gap, because you were speaking about girls in sports earlier. I mean, I think the dropout rate of girls in competitive sport between the ages of 13 and 18 is so high. And we know that the leaders of tomorrow, the women in leading positions, they've all been competitive sports girls in their teenage years. So there's a real correlation between girls excelling in sport and girls excelling in later life. And I don't mean that everybody needs to excel. I didn't. I mean, I certainly didn't play competitive sports as a teenager, but I just think that there's a real correlation, and we know that all of those data points up until now are pretty depressing, actually. We still live in this world where a girl in her teenage years feels the stress levels up by 241%. I mean, that's massive. And getting anxious by 88%, because obviously the space she inhabits doesn't look the way or feel the way that she needs to succeed or excel or become her own, or feel held and heard and seen. Otherwise we wouldn't see those data points being so high.
Yeah, that's why I'm posing the question, or I'm wondering, observing that it's the structures,
Yeah,
that are in place, and
yeah,
I think that's why we're seeing so many of the structures restructuring, falling apart, so that they can be rebuilt in a more holistic way that serves the whole,
whole.
and not just a certain portion that does really well, let's say in sports. But what about all the girls that have nothing to do with sports? Where's their arena, or where's
Yeah,
their space where they're being seen, witnessed, and supported and lifted? I love you talking about mentorship, and I've I've attempted and run a couple circles where we
yeah.
established mentorship relationships. And because we don't naturally do it for one another up until now, women don't naturally think to mentor other women up until now. And so you're really leaning into aggressively supporting mentorship programs with She Can.
Yeah, definitely. And thankfully it resonates, because also that we didn't know, right? We were we saw the listener numbers go up, but we didn't really know if we are going to make a dent here. And I think once you're in a couple of million listeners, and that going up by 500,000 a month or something, even though the algorithm buries our content, then I think you're onto something. And that is the exciting point now, that we know we're onto something. We tell every story, no matter the background, the industry, wherever a woman is from. No story is too small or too big. We want to have all the incredibly well-known women of the world, but really we got to millions of listeners with, everyday women telling their stories. So I think this is a very, very powerful proof that this is needed. And this is needed not just for girls and women, but also for men, knowing that 50% of our listeners are men. And at the beginning, I thought, maybe are they all, headhunters? Are they all, who are these men? And now we
Yeah.
know they look for guidance. And I think we girls and women of today, we tore up this rule book, and we set a lot of things of what we don't want. And I don't think we really spelled out all the things that we do want, and how we want to see the world, and how we can change the narrative and the world around us to include us more. And I think they're looking for guidance. And I think they need us to step up and get into the ring and spell out what we need and what we want, and the desires and dreams we have, and what kind of backup we need from them. And I think
Absolutely.
that's why we have a masculinity crisis as well, right? And we have a mental health crisis, because we don't have the balance, and we don't also have all the answers. That is why having those circles and conversations is so important, to figure out what are all the truths, to then find solutions.
When you say mental health crisis, I want to add to that, we have an emotional health crisis. That I talked about discomfort earlier. The emotional health crisis is, up until now, because we're changing it, we have gotten so far away from our feelings. We've numbed our feelings. We don't want to feel our feelings. It's not safe to feel our feelings up until now. So these safer spaces, or these modalities, are blooming all over the planet, where humans get to feel their feelings. And right, and men need it too. Men were taught, don't feel your feelings, cut them off.
Yeah.
Then women somehow adopted that, going like, don't cry, don't show your emotions, you're too emotional. So we're all walking around disconnected from our emotions, but then seeking all of these, ways to numb our feelings because they're too scary. But now we're learning the brilliance of our feeling bodies and how healthy it is. And yes, women, we need to start with women. If women aren't crying, who's crying? Who's teaching the boys how to cry? Who's holding space for the men? to also have their big feelings. I love, 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 love that there are spaces now that we can all see and connect because we have all this beautiful technology, that there are spaces and men are evolving into more feeling humans,
Yeah.
and women too, with circles, with retreats, with all these different practices. And that's what I love to share on the podcast, all these different practices that are out there, all these different platforms, your platform that's out there, and like spreading the good news, because there is so much good news out there. And if we can focus on that and stay aligned with that and keep creating these spaces together for healing, for repair, for information, spiritual connection, wellness, support, we can, you and I have big ideas and we've talked about them offline, but we really do believe that there is something else that is emerging out of this darkness. What's the saying? No mud, no lotus, or no lotus, no mud, no lotus. Like, you need the darkness for the ascension or the awakening, that it is
Yeah.
possible, or it is happening. How about that? It's not even that it's
Yeah.
possible, it's happening.
I think it's happening, and actually, it's about survival. I think it's really about so much more, and to keep evoluting as a species, we need that.
You said something else, and the image came to me, and I've been circling about this, or I've been sharing this image in meditations and in circles, is how to build and strengthen your own circle. So looking at the people in your circle, in your intimate circle, and what you provide for one another in that circle. And if you're missing a part of your circle, that you get really busy curating it, calling it in, and finding those different people, pieces for your circle. And I'm saying circle in, you could say community, but I like to picture it like a real circle, like a pie chart. And if I'm missing divine masculine in my circle, I need to call that in. I need to source that. I need to find the men, because there are brilliant, beautiful men out there that are needing what I offer or what I give or what I can exchange, co-create with them. If I need that, I need to call that in, and kind of go through your circle and decide, or intuit, what do I need? How do I strengthen my circle?
Yes, and I think that's an ongoing journey for all of us. We lose some and we need to add some. And I think a beautiful way of looking at it is the way you just said it. Think about it. Where do you feel are the gaps in your circle, and what do I need? And then to go out and look for it. Mm-hmm. Because the role models are there, and I heard a podcast the other day, and I don't remember which one it was, and they said, I have this role model and that role model, and then the interviewer said, but do you know them personally? She said, no, I've never met them before, I just listen to them. And that's exactly what I think. We don't need to know everybody in person. We have this incredible technology open to us. We can have access to people we never thought imaginable, and we can listen to them, and when things resonate, I absolutely worship the ground Jane Fonda walks on. Have I ever met her? No. I listen to everything she says. I think that, when she says, I have my girlfriends, therefore I am, I feel exactly the same way. I feel connected to her in weird cosmic ways that I don't know why that is. But this is, we have the possibility to do that. We have
so
girls
true.
in Ethiopia listening to our conversations. That's amazing.
That's amazing.
So this transformational power that we hold with our conversations and our stories is literally open to the world in this day and age. And that's very exciting.
I've been using this tagline that sharing our stories is the medicine.
Yeah.
And that connection is the revolution. How we connect our stories, that's the revolution. two things. One, I had the privilege of sitting in a circle with Jane Fonda, who is one of my idols too. And you know me, I'm just like very, I don't make it a big deal, but the fact that I just got to sit in sacred space with her, I was leading the circle, she was there. But more important, to your point, I've gotten more from her from reading her memoir, from listening to her speeches. Like that has been more informational mentorship to me than the privilege I had of sharing real time and space with her. So I just wanted to share that with you.
Yeah, thank you. No,
Yeah.
absolutely. I feel that 100%. And I think that, you know, the degree of separation that we have in this technological age is so much smaller than ever before. We have access to people's, you know, stories or insights or experiences, and that degree of separation is tiny. So there's really,
It's like
it's
we
all
have
out there.
we have access to endless wisdom.
Yeah, endless
Endless.
wisdom. I totally
Endless.
agree. Endless wisdom.
Endless.
Endless wisdom, and you know, I sort of think, you know, up until a couple of years ago, all the podcasts were talking about how business meetings, that it wasn't a place for emotions, and you know, emotions would derail businesses and all of that. And now we have incredible women, you know, founders that have podcasts that say exactly the opposite. And that's what we need more of, because we'll get to a place where we are more in balance, because we have more stories out there. We simply didn't have our stories out there. We weren't holding those positions. We didn't have those stories out there. And so we have to back each other up, right? I invite you, you invite me, we invite all the other women in your circle and in my circle. And then we get to a place where we have, just numbers wise, we created something that will tip the scales. And that's what we need. You know, men are always backing each other up. They're always inviting each other on their podcast. They're always inviting each other to their business meeting. They always invest in each other. This is what we now have to do. And they're showing it to us actually beautifully. And because we're not competitive in nature in the same way, we will include everybody in the mix, not just now girls and women, because we're not looking for dominance. We're looking for balance and for a slice of the pie.
We're not looking for dominance, we're looking for balance, and we're looking for integration and serving the whole. Not just ourselves. It's not, like you said, it's not like women want to now take
It's
over
not an
and
ego
dominate.
trip.
No. We actually want to include and seek wholeness. That's my, like, embody wholeness rather than, you know, I don't want to be in my masculine part. I don't want to dominate. I want to be in my divinely balanced masculine and feminine, leading with my feminine, leading with my divine feminine. All right, ladies, do you have any burning desire questions? Do you want to come on and ask Stephanie anything before we move on to the ripple effect questions?
Yes, please. Stephanie, I'm so obsessed with everything you're doing, and I'm wondering if you have a story about a personal mentor that you had as a young woman.
You know, I think my grandmothers, and my grandmother once removed, who I also grew up with, we called her Granny, and she was married to an astrophysicist from Germany, and they were found by the Americans and then were transported to Huntsville, Alabama to work for NASA. And her husband died very early, and she then worked for NASA her whole life. And the stories that she used to tell me, being the only woman in the room for decades and decades, I think it has really impacted me in a way that was transformational. And hearing the stories of my grandmothers, of how they had to flee Hungary with their 6 children in a train with a newborn that kept on breathing, and they had to turn her around and pat her on the back and going to a different country and setting up their lives again and looking after. Then once they were settled, all the other relatives were coming, and the house was 30 or 40 relatives, and my grandmother jumping on a moped with a gun going in the forest to shoot a deer to have food for the relatives. You know, those kind of stories are the stories that really, I think, propelled me to where I am today. And that is just, I think, that's sort of a European reality. You know, we're this beautiful melting pot of people from all kinds of European countries that ended up, you know, in Germany or in Austria or in, you know, because we had wars and we had lots of migration and new societies formed, and, you know, this resilience and these stories, and actually all the incredibly beautiful stories that came out. That my father, who sadly died last year, but, you know, he was old and he lived in the Second World War, and he was, you know, drafted into the SS, and then my grandmother hid his brother and him in the forest for the last couple of months of the war so that the SS wouldn't find them. And, you know, those stories, and where they find the beauty in those stories. You know, there are so many stories where you're howling with laughter. And so I think it was this time where people had to make do and find solutions, and it was about life and death, actually. And while I'm very grateful that we live in these times where we had relative peace for, you know, long amounts of time, we get confronted with this reality all the time. And I'm very grateful for those incredible role models. And actually, I'm grateful for every girl, woman, and man coming on WeCan telling their stories, because every single story that I hear, which is why it makes it also so personal and not just a collective thing, I hear what I need to hear. You know, I do it for myself as much as I do it for everybody else, and I do it for my daughter and for my godchildren, and for, you know, it's almost a physical need to hear those truths and those pieces of wisdom and those insights that help me, and also help other people.
I'm picking up what you're putting down, which is stories are not only medicine, they're nutrition. They're as important as
They're
what we
seeds,
eat.
and seeds grow. It's sowing seeds, and I think that's a very powerful thing, and we keep forgetting about that. And actually, we if we look at life as role modeling all day long, you know, we would be much better humans. And we would think more about what the right thing to do is, and we would spread the kindness more. And so if we get up in the morning and think, you know, today I'm really trying to be the best version of myself, that's being a role model.
Yes, and so I want to ask you these ripple effect questions that we love to do, and what we offer is that our listeners can take these ripple effect questions to their own communities, their dinner tables, their friends, their parties, whatever, as a way to deepen their connection and to share their stories. Like maybe it's going to lead to found them. Okay. Can you share something you changed your mind about recently?
Gosh, what did I change my mind about? You know, I just recently changed my mind about the men listening to this podcast and why there is 50%. I literally thought at the beginning, these are headhunters or men that want to look at pretty girls or women, basically. And now with the feedback that we're getting and reaching out and trying to get the feedback, we understand that they need as much guidance as we do from each other. And that's I really radically changed my mind on this.
Yes, and all right, number 2. If you had a magic wand and could shift one habit or pattern or story forever, what would you want to change?
I would want every girl and woman in the world to champion other girls and women. Very simple.
Yes, and thank you, Stephanie. I've loved our conversation. I love our time together always. I love radically supporting you. I love the radical support that you have shown me over the years. And here's to reaching 10,000 interviews and 10 million plus listeners. And you really are the ripple effect. You really are. You are the ripple effect. So this has been thrilling for me. So thank you.
Dre and Em and Tracy, I'm so honored to be on your podcast. I cannot wait to listen to new episodes come out every week. I am really, truly a radical supporter of everything you do, and I am so grateful for having learned circling, sitting in circles, and hopefully doing my own circles further down the line. So thank you so much to all of you.
Okay, love you.
Thank you.